right of the people, baby.
To truly choose to love is heroic.
Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people. And we're going to have to put it back in the hands of the people.
It takes the willingness to stand by and do what has to be done when it has to be done.
What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the Off the Shelf Book Club. My name is Jermaine.
My name is Jessalin.
And we're so excited to get into chapter 2 with y'all of Unbuild Walls by Silky Shah. And before we get into all of that, I just want to ask y'all, like, subscribe, follow, hype the video. All you got to do to hype the video is where you see the like and the share, all that. Slide right all the way to the right. And there's a hype button that just puts us in front of more eyes. And we just want to continue to share the knowledge that we are learning every day. And if you or anybody else that you know of need resources to access this book, check down below. We have in our description all the resources that we have found to make reading easy, as well as on haymarketbooks.org. You can download this book for free, the ebook version, and you can read it with us. Share it to people. This knowledge is very necessary, and we want to continue to spread the knowledge. And before we get into our regular program, let's get into our land acknowledgement.
The Off the Shelf Book Club wants to offer our utmost respect to those who came before us on this land. It is important that we protect and acknowledge the history of indigenous people of America. Minnesota Makoche, which means the land of the water that reflects the sky, is the homeland of the Dakota and Anishinaabe people. Minnesota in its history has taken a part in the genocide of Native people and multiple treaties that have stripped them from their homelands. Where Off the Shelf Book Club resides is home of the Mittawakaton people, which means dwellers of the Spirit Lake. Off the Shelf Book Club will do whatever we can to honor the Native people and their lands.
Awesome. And I guess getting into this chapter, what are some of your first thoughts of chapter 2?
I think the biggest thing about chapter 2 really plays on like that first question is, how did Obama and the Bearer of Hope and Change end up with the highest detention and deportation rates in the United States history, and how did we as people turn away and allow it? So like this chapter 2 is really focused on Obama and his terms in his presidency.
Yeah.
And like he deported so many people, but also in the same like politics do, the way that they alter words, convince you to think things and of that nature. Like, you probably wouldn't have looked at how bad it really was with what was outwardly being said.
Right.
You would have had to pay attention to numbers and what was truly happening on the ground to realize, this shouldn't be happening right here, right now. Mm-hmm. And I know some of us, especially those who are our age, were kids during his presidency. So like we really wouldn't have been paying attention to that unless we were directly affected.
Right. And I honestly, like, I feel like this chapter really summed up how I do think that Trump is probably the worst president in American history, but it also has affirmed that I think that he is what America is. He's the epitome of America. And instead of the being politically correct when telling people that you're going to displace them, you're going to segregate against them, you're going to pretty much just terrorize a community, but you do it in nicer words, like how Obama has done.
And I think it's like that space of like his campaign literally being on hope for multiple reasons, him being the first black president and all those things, and yet was actively stripping away hope and change from immigrants and from a specific group of people. That doesn't make any sense.
Exactly. And it's this, the slogans of America really make it easy to manipulate people. And I think that there is a reality that we look at MAGA as a cult, but I think America as a whole is a cult because we are so used to this violence. We're so used to this violence. Like 93% of our history, only about like 17 years of our history has actually been without war, without violence. And even within those 17 years, we know that there was violence within our country. Because not only do we terrorize other countries, we also terrorize our citizens that live here. And we terrorize communities, and we sit here and we act like it doesn't happen. That's why personally the No Kings protest really just irked my nerves on so many different levels, because I feel like it was such a performance of, yeah, we're fed up because it's starting to affect us and it never affected us. And that's the issue, because in Minnesota we had like 100,000 people, I think they said, that came out. And where were those 100,000 people when George Floyd was killed, Philando Castile was killed, Amar Clark was killed? There's so many other names that I could bring up, but we're not going to take the time today to get into those details because we know those names. And they will continue to live on forever. But where were you when that was going on? And if a war because of gas prices is what's going to get you to come outside, and not the fact that our government is slaughtering people in our streets, not just in Trump's presidency, because Trayvon Martin, that was like one of the first ones where I'm an adolescent, so I'm starting to form my own opinions and see the world from my own eyes. And that was under Barack Obama. And I know we're talking about immigrant justice, but it's like this sense of we're so used to the violence. We're so used to violence. And we act like it's a normal thing that we should be accepting, but it's not normal. And like the fact that we look at immigration as a criminal offense when it's really just a civil offense. You're like, America is a cult. We switch the reality, we are not living in the same reality as the rest of the world.
And I think like that's where you get into this like unnecessary idea of like what is a good versus a bad immigrant. If you say a bad immigrant comes here illegally, well, it's like impossible for an immigrant to come here completely legally. At some point in time, a immigrant is probably going to become illegal even temporarily, because the system that's put in place for them to become legal citizens is set up to take years and years and years and years, like 10 to 15 on average, depending on a multitude of things, what country you're coming from, etc., which is also an issue in itself, right? Countries that are like in Latin America, in Africa, in the Middle East, like all those places, not only at one point had a ban on them, or in Asia, like had a ban on them at some point that was written into law, but they have smaller capacities that are allowed to come through here than white European countries do. And so that's a big issue, because especially a lot of the reasons why people from those countries come here in the first place is because of the violence that America enacts in those countries, whether it's something that you can outwardly see or not. Right? America aids in starting coups and civil wars in other countries all the time, when we don't even truly see them or notice them at all. And so for you to say that they're a bad immigrant because they come through here illegally is ultimately bullshit. It's bullshit.
Yeah.
Because they could do everything right and their visa expires. That doesn't all of a sudden make them a bad immigrant, or they're coming here because of war, a war that we probably aided in starting in the first place. Like, that shouldn't make them a bad immigrant. And the idea that there are good and bad people based on what they do and what crimes they act, that would also mean that Americans are inherently bad and should be removed from this country too.
Exactly.
But nobody would say that that should happen.
Exactly. And I think if we want to use those words of good and bad immigrant, which I don't want to, but if we're going to look at it like that, the only bad immigrant that has ever been in America were the original people who landed on Plymouth Rock. Because they came when what they brought was sickness. What they brought was a genocide. What they brought was constant war and displacement, enslavement. And that is the only time. I think that's what the issue with America too is that we constantly are self-projecting onto other people, onto other communities, because we know what we're capable of. We are the only country in this world that has dropped a nuclear bomb and dropped it on a civilization, and now we're the ones who are policing people with nukes. And it's this, I think it's a sense of like a xenophobic. There's xenophobic, obviously, but also people of color can't be in charge of their autonomy. And that's why we look at all these other countries and foreign countries as these huge threats, because they are trying to have autonomy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we continue to, and when these other countries also embrace their immigrants, we look at them as, we call them socialists, communists, as if that's a slur. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's because we're just self-projecting because we are the actual, like, villains in the story.
Yeah.
So we probably should get into our first question.
Yeah. And so I think where, like, it gets into, like, how do we turn a people away and allow it, is that, like, coercion and, like, understanding, like, there are bad and good immigrants, and the bad ones need to go away, but the good ones do. But then how do you determine who's bad and who's good? Oh, somebody came here illegally, so now they're bad and they have to be snatched up and taken. Not to mention, right, this how they twisted not family separation, how families shouldn't be separated. Pretty sure, like, Obama was a major one of, like, families should not be separated. Families can't be separated. And that just made it a space where then he could go in and deport an entire family together.
Exactly. And he also reneged on that, I believe. I think he took that back, and eventually, she said it in here, there eventually was one where they separated families.
Yeah.
which is just like the fact that they're able to just constantly say, "Oh yeah, we're gonna do this," and then just like psych your mind. You're not getting what we said we agreed on, and like the constant pushback of trying to help this situation, because at the end of the day, a lot of the times the people who are trying to reform the immigration process, they weren't trying to abolish it. They were just trying to genuinely make it, I guess, more humane.
They're trying to reform it, and that then gets to the space of what's the difference between abolition and reform. Which I don't want to necessarily cut you off, so I want you to continue your thought for that. Get into that space.
Like, so, in like the way that a lot of the reform that he even did, like it says here on 45, thus many of the reforms he proposed further legitimize the narrative of the good immigrant versus the bad immigrant, and the use of detention and deportation as a tool for public safety. And I'm just really confused on how does immigration and immigrants affect public safety? That's my genuine thought. Because at the end of the day, yes, no matter what, there's going to be a person who's an immigrant who commits a crime. That's going to happen, just like Americans do, just like everybody does in their countries. There's going to be crime, but majority of them are not going to commit crimes because they also understand the danger of being an immigrant in America, and they don't commit crime. They commit less crimes than the average American. And so where is the public safety in this? And immigration is a civil issue. Where is the public safety issue? Like jaywalking. We're not going to sit here and say that's a public safety issue. Well, it is. But
you would say it's a public safety issue because it could inherently.
Well, what I mean by that is it's not gonna sit here and it's not creating more violence in our streets. Jaywalking, I just brought that up because it's like a very not really serious
Nobody
offense.
should actually be charged with an offense.
Nobody should be detained for that, because at the end of the day,
that too.
Misdemeanor, they're both misdemeanors. And what we know about misdemeanors is that they're not really meant for detainment. You might pay a fine, you might have to do some community service, but majority of misdemeanors will not lead you to detainment.
Well, that's not true.
Majority of them
Detainment
won't.
is as minimum as you just being handcuffed into the back of a vehicle.
Okay.
Which they can be.
Okay. My apologies.
It would be
not
being
detained.
Charged, like you said, a fine or a community service.
What I mean by that, when I was saying was detained, was meaning put in a jail, putting into a detention center of some sort, whether that's immigration detention center or that's a jail, or county jail. So that's what I mean by that. And there's no need to do that, because at the end of the day, we know that they are here, and that's what they are trying to do. And if we have people who are just trying to be here and they're not committing crimes, because what we need to realize and we need to accept is that Obama didn't discriminate either. Just like how Trump has not discriminated against who is and who isn't a citizen. Citizens always end up getting caught in the crossfires of this shit. He has deported citizens. He has put them in detention centers. And so if you're not being clean, if we know you're not going to be clean doing this the right way, and we've given Democrats, Republicans, different types of chances to do this, it's not going to work. It's not working. Cool. All right, so this next question that we're working on is it possible to create a detention center that is not penal in nature?
I think where you were kind of getting at first too is what does immigration have to do with public safety? And that's really the difference between reform and abolition that really like highlights the difference between reform and abolition. Reform is supposed to quote unquote make things more humane, make things better, but they still believe in the system that is in place. The system just needs to be fixed. It's broken, etc. And so what that can actually do is cause a lot of harm. It can cause more harm than it can actually reform, right? That whole family separation thing is a great example in terms of immigration and how reform of not separating families is actually causing a lot of harm to immigrant families. And that doesn't necessarily mean we need to separate them. No, what it means is that reform is not the answer. Abolition is the answer. And so this question of, can we create detention centers that are not penal? I don't think that you can, because I mean, the phrase in itself, a detention center, would mean that you are being punished and that there is a penalty to you doing something. And so I think that's the issue. Abolition doesn't mean that you're not held accountable. What it means, though, is that you're held accountable in a way that doesn't harm you, and that it actually helps all those people who are involved. And so getting back to that space of like, what does all this have to do with public safety? The reality is that statistics would show you that time and time again, Americans are the ones that are committing the crimes that you're saying everybody else is doing.
Yep.
Right? And you can translate it into also by race and by gender and those things. Men are committing a lot of crimes. White men are committing a lot of crimes. Partly has to do with that because America is mostly white. But then at the same time, right, like, we're committing a similar amount of crimes across races. And that automatically, right, people are going to commit more or less crimes based on how many people make up a percentage of America. But the reality is that we, like, our prison systems and our legal systems, civil or criminal, doesn't actually, like, provide us safety. Because if it did, then statistics wouldn't look the way it did. 1 in 4 women wouldn't be raped. 1 in 12 boys wouldn't be raped, right? If our actual prison system did the work it was intended to do. Not to mention the majority of our prison systems aren't made up of murderous killers. Because that would mean that 25% of the world's population is murderous killers, and that's just not the case.
Exactly.
And so abolition really, like, asks you to almost, like, a lot of people think that abolitionists are imaginary and we think in hopefulness, but, like, in reality, like, we're asking you to check reality. Reality is that we're, like, people aren't doing what you think they're doing, which is why you think you need this. And so it's asking you to check reality and be like, okay, like, this literally is doing nothing for us.
Right.
And so detention centers will do nothing for us. They don't need to be there. They don't need to exist. They should cease to exist. Because even if somebody, an immigrant, were to come in here illegally and sell drugs, for example, like, I think it's a good idea to ask them why. You might get an answer that's not something that you would think.
Right.
And it might just be slowly based on survival, like people here do already. Is to try and survive in a world that doesn't want you to.
Exactly. And you're trying to survive in a world that's also constantly criminalizing you. Just like how she was talking about how they were trying to upgrade some of these places that they were holding we're just going to call them detention centers, these different type of detention centers for immigrants. And she's talking about her experience of walking through there. And it was a halfway house located next door to the Essex County Jail. It was surrounded by barbed wire. Upon entering, visitors were inundated with self-help signs with messages such as "Stop lying" and "Admit when you were wrong," which ICE referred to as artwork. As we made our way through the jail, taking in the dim environment, there were very few windows. In bleak living conditions, many of us questioned what made the facility civil. Throughout the tour, ICE public advocate Andrew Lorenz Strait continuously stated that this is not a jail, in what seemed to be an attempt to convince himself as much as the advocates present. And then later we got the New York Times covering the opening and described the scene at the detention center as unarmed staff members dressed in blue polo shirts and khaki trousers are known as resident advisors, not guards. Much of the media coverage affirmed ICE's talking points about the civil aspect of the facility. And where I'm going with that of what you were talking about, if you talk to someone, and whether that's someone who's committing crimes, who seems like they're going down that road of committing crimes, who knows people or who their family commits crimes, you have these conversations with people and you will realize that they've always been criminalized before they even were doing the criminal acts. And when with these signs that are saying "Stop lying" and "Admit when you are wrong," you are automatically criminalizing everyone that walks in and sees that. Mm-hmm. Because at the end of the day, why are you assuming that I'm lying? Why are you assuming that I'm wrong? Just assume, like to make that assumption that someone is lying or is automatically wrong in these detention centers is criminalizing them. I know it's so little, but the language is there. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's blatant, and calling that artwork.
Yeah. Talks about that space of like how we use words is super important. Like I think a big similar like sense, right? How we naturally criminalize, right, immigrants through that kind of language. The use of like super predator, right, with black men and black children in particularly, right? Like the idea of super predator, you're criminalizing them, you're calling them something but human, you're dehumanizing them by saying those things.
Like the YN conversation we had the other day. You're just dehumanizing these people. You're criminalizing them. You're automatically putting them into this box. And, you know, we as humans, when you constantly are getting fed this information, getting fed this narrative, you're bound to start believing in this narrative, point blank, period. Like, we're influenced by our surroundings, and that's everyone, no matter who you are. And if you're constantly getting surrounded by the fact that you're a criminal, you're more likely to become a criminal, and that's not necessarily that person's fault. I mean, we have to do more to make sure that we're not doing that. And I guess we have to use our imagination to figure out the way of, and we got to be creative to figure out ways to actually make this not a criminal punishment or discipline for these civil situations.
Especially because they're not getting the things that are supposed to be helpful in criminal cases.
Exactly. They're separated. She talked about it. These ICE facilities are separated from society, just like a lot of jails are. They're very far from metropolitan areas because they know that that's where they can get lawyer help. That's where probably their family or somebody that they know they can get in contact with. If you separate them from the rest of their community, then it's going to be harder to locate them. And if you make them very far and out, you can't, it's going to be like, oh, it's going to be a day trip to go find him here, see if he's here. And then they're not going to give me any information. Okay, well, shit. Tomorrow, I guess we got to go all the way over here to see if he's there, and make it like a more, it's like a chess match. They know what they're doing, and we got to stop acting like that and like making it, normalizing that shit. Because would you want to be told like you're stop or admit when you're wrong off rip when you walk in a place?
And you could argue that, like, in some cases, right, this has a and I think that there's a really good argument that this is a worser case than those, like, being thrown away in prison just for criminal, like, acts as a citizen. Like, right, you're away from the legal help that you could get. Well, those lawyers aren't going to come out and seek you, unlike our criminal legal system where you are appointed a lawyer if you cannot afford one, if you can't get one, right? They don't have that because that's not how civil, civil issues are addressed here in America. And so they don't get that type of thing. You know, when you can look up anybody and find out what jail they're in and what they're in there for and all those things. Like, you can't find your family members the way that you could if you needed to, if somebody was arrested. Right? You can find if somebody was arrested before they, like, as soon as they get booked. Like, all right, oh, they're there, right? I can, we may go, to help them or whatever. Like, they can't do that. And in some cases, they're in across the country, right? Like, there are plenty of times where here, for example, where plenty of family members were up and taken, and within 24 hours, now, while their family is trying to find them, they find out that they're all the way in Texas. Yeah. Not everybody has money to just go down there in Texas and try and help out their family members. Like, not everybody can do that. Yeah. A lot of people can't, actually, because of the state of this country. Most people can't afford that today.
And we sit here and we take advantage of the fact that, oh, it's a civil case. So no, we're not gonna appoint you because you having a right to an attorney. We're not gonna appoint that to you. You don't have that right since it's a civil case. But we are gonna punish you like it's a criminal case.
You don't have a right to a jury. You don't got no jury.
Right, exactly. And so they take advantage of all these facts that it is a civil matter, but then they also address it and deal with it in the conditions that they're in like it's a criminal matter. Like, I've avoided looking at a lot of the information about the current state of detention centers because I don't even want to know the horrors that are going on, because there was a point in here where she talked about how a lot of the times, they started to implement, like, you had to meet these standards, but they weren't even standards at that point. They were really just recommendations, because the people who would come and look at them, they weren't being hard, like, oh yeah, you got to have more windows in here, take down those posters, why is it so bleak in this room, put in some more lights, install some more lights. Looking at like they're not doing those things. They're just like, okay, are the people able to survive? All right, cool, let's go. They're not making sure that there are some standards being met, because there's fucking human beings here. And we have to start, like, I think the first move before we do this, or when we're moving forward to making sure that we are not, that we're abolish it first. But when we're sitting here trying to work with them, there's a point where we have to set the standard of, no, we're not budging at this point, because if we budge here, we are letting go of the fact that these are human beings here.
I think for our next question, which you kind of like started to get into and like alluded to about how, in terms of like who's checking those detention centers, and those prisons, and they're not checking to see if they're abided by code, right? This next question is, how has our criminal legal system created a capitalist monster? And that's a space of this private prison industry. When you have private prisons, you don't have to check those things in the same way of like a government funded prison or detention center would have to. And so capitalists and like capitalism cuts corners in that way. Well, if we can fund private prisons, we don't got to worry about actually making sure that these prisons and these detention centers are actually up by code and like can actually sustain as many people as they are putting in there. And that's why there's like 30 people to one toilet in one little area. Like, it's horrible. And so I also think like a really big space of capitalism and how this is funded is the idea of borders. The idea of borders can be it doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you really truly break them down. What is a border? Why do we have them anyways? And like, is it crazy to think of how would it look if we had if we had countries that were borderless? Like, sometimes I kind of think about Europe in itself, how you can freely go across borders, right, of different countries. You ain't got to check no passports. You ain't got to go through the 500 million checks it takes to get into the neighboring countries. You're not doing that. People can just like cross freely as things go.
Right.
You see that all the time. And so I think about that, like, what would that look like? And at one point we did, and so that's another part of creating capitalist monsters, fear mongering, right? Where like for the most part there was a space where you could go in and out of Canada, go in and out of Mexico, whatever, pretty smoothly. And then, of course, 9/11 had to happen and whatever, and people think that we need to border up all the...
I believe it was even before 9/11, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was the, what was it, the mall?
Not the way that it is today. People can...
Well, yeah.
People were able to go into airports without checkpoints the way that they did. People were able to go through the borders, and that's not to say that there weren't places that were checking your passport before then.
Yeah, I just mean the in more intense, and that I think that was the beginning of like the being afraid of domestic terrorism and looking at it through the lens of we can't allow as many foreigners in, even though it was a white man who did the bombing. It was this, I know that that was like one of the first attacks in a really long time on American soil that like shook the average person. And it was, I think that, I know that there was an increase of just police and ICE presence. I want to say it was Clinton who did that, who created ICE. Or created like some type of, I'm blanking on it right now.
ICE was created in anywhere between 2001 and 2003.
Then what was it?
Can't remember what.
What is ICE under?
DHS?
DHS. Yeah.
DHS said it was created before then.
Yeah, I think that's what was created. DHS was created because that shit, the Oklahoma bombing. But another way I think that the quotas is how it has also increased the or just added on to the capitalistic monster that we know of today as the prison system and the immigration detention center system, because we have this fuckboy named Robert Byrd. Is that his name? Yeah, a Democrat from West Virginia. He said the language which came to be known as the detention bed mandate started that the administration shall maintain a level of not less than 33,400 detention beds. The bed quota, which was later raised to 34,000, would remain a feature of the federal budget for 8 years, facilitating the expansion of the detention system. That type of quota sets a standard. You got to meet that. Okay, we're going to do everything that we got to do to meet that, even if that means inhumane shit, even if that means, okay, we're breaking the law because this person's actually a citizen and they're just going to be taking up bed space.
Not to mention, it also funds that space of capitalism and the fact that, right, our prison system's actually disinvested, right, for the most part, from private prisons. But do you know who did it? Our immigration system. Our immigration system did not, and in fact, quite literally said that they can't function without the use of private prisons, and part of that has to do with that quota, right? When you have a quota standard, well, now we have to. We have to continue to fund this, because without this, then we can't meet that quotas. We can't meet those quotas, like all those things, right? It's this line down, right? It all leads to this money space that gets made.
And personally, I'm not taking anything seriously from a former KKK member. And I'm not going to support many of any, or probably any policy that a KKK member supports, especially when it comes to immigration. So why are we allowing, like, the fact that a motherfucker who was, I gotta stop saying that, I apologize. A person who was part of the KKK before is able to get into fucking Senate and is able to start making immigration laws, policies, making quotas, and that's who we're getting our standards from. We need to reevaluate all that shit. The hell is wrong with us for even letting him speak, have a breath on the Senate? You don't get to influence, manipulate anything, and you're the one who installs the quota. Yeah, I know it's a bad idea now, even more now. There's just a sense of we gotta have better standards. What the hell do we want with ourselves? And just expanding, this constant expansion shows you that there is profit in this. Because
because ain't nothing being expanded without profit in this country, in particularly. When we see rapid expansion the way that we have, it's because there's immense profit being made. Like, yeah, okay, like you can like there's a bunch of arguments about how keeping as many people in prison costs a whole lot of money, and at the same time, right, they wouldn't be doing it if it's not making them so many millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars.
Exactly. And if you are dealing with a problem, don't you want the numbers to go down? Like, the goal here is that if we crack down on this issue, like if we want to stop drug overdoses, if we want to stop drug overdoses, we want the number to constantly go down. Why do you have a quota for these beds that you keep the same each year, or you increase? Sounds like you're not really dealing with the issue. You're expanding the issue. You want the issue to continue so you can make money off of it. And I think that, like, there's a reality that you just got to accept it. This war on immigration is an extension of the war on crime. It's creating an issue. Drugs literally plopped into these black and brown communities who didn't have a lot of resources to get by in the first place. And then all of a sudden you're telling me that they just get a bunch of fucking guns? They get a bunch of fucking drugs?
It's all an extension of it, right? It's
Right.
the idea that, like, we have to use whatever is currently providing the country with fear. So at one point it was crime because, right, the politicians, allowed for it. It was drugs at one point. It was, I feel like I'm missing one, but whatever, like, and then, like, it became the war on terror, right? Like, what's fear mongering? The war on terror, right, was because 9/11 happened. People are automatically, right, being, they're being fearful of this, like, they're the country's in disarray. Okay, well, now we're gonna have a war on it. Make them feel better. I think the idea that having a war on something to ultimately make somebody feel better about it is crazier in itself. There are better ways to make people feel better than to enact war on something. And so here, right, I think this is just an extension of the war on terror, because for whatever reason we believe that immigrants are terrorists and they're going to do terroristic things, because that's what it all leads to,
Because
right?
that's what we do.
Every time something happens that is a form of domestic terrorism or terrorism in general, like, it gets looped in with a bunch of immigrants, right? It gets looped in with immigrants, and that doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense.
And we sit here and we have to have a standard, bro. Like, I keep on saying that. We got to have a standard. At the end of the day, the way that the war on immigrants began is because Obama don't got a fucking backbone. Don't got a backbone. And he is the same to what the black and brown community experienced, what Reagan did to the black and brown community. He is that for immigrants. Because let's just look at it like this. By the end of Obama's tenure in office, over 3 million people had been detained and formally deported, more than any other president. It was also under Obama that prosecutions for immigration in the federal courts reached their highest levels before Trump took office, and he set it up. So if Trump is inhumane right now with what he is doing with our immigration system, Obama was also inhumane, and he laid the groundwork. Just like how Reagan laid the groundwork for the continued war on crime, war on drugs, bullshit, where it affected us, where we were all getting affected the most. And many, and in the book, Silky Shah says, many have pointed to Obama's desire to pass comprehensive immigration reform as a core reason in an effort to secure legalization for undocumented immigrants. The Obama administration ramped up immigration enforcement to placate Republicans who criticized him for being soft on the issue. While this was certainly part of Obama's play, it was also clear, as with most Democrats, that he was fully invested in the war on crime approach to governing. Thus, many of the reforms he proposed further legitimized the narrative of the good, I kind of said that earlier, of the good versus the bad immigrant. And because he didn't have a backbone, because he clearly wanted to be like, oh, see, as the first black president, I'm gonna be tough. I'm gonna be tough on this shit.
And I think part of that is also just like it happens all the time when Democrats enter in that space of, trying to hold office, is that, Republicans harm down on that. Oh, you're too soft on this, you're too soft on that. Whether it's immigration, it's crime, it's terrorism, it's drugs, etc., right? So then there's that feel of need to then be harder than what should actually be. The idea is, like, why don't you just, like, what if someone to be like, you know what? If that's what you think, sure. Yeah, I am. You want to know why? Because this is that and the third might actually get you somewhere more than somewhere else. That in my part was like a big fault on Kamala Harris's campaign when she had put in that space of like immigration, and she was talking about that immigration piece. I was like, no,
Yep.
I don't like that. That's not what you were supposed to do.
Exactly. And it's kind of like with the whole, not exactly the same because it's different topics, but like how she was really beating around the damn bush with like standing up for Palestine. Just say it's a genocide going on. Admit that what's going on is bad. And she probably could have fucking won. Like, that's the reality of it. We have to really start holding these people accountable and making it to where this is our demands. And you know what? The sad reality is that we might have to lose a few elections by making sure that we are saying, yo, this is what we want. We're not budging till we get it. Okay, we'll find a third party option. We'll find another party option if we need to. But if you're not going to do it, then we will continue to move on. And we just have to start doing that with our pockets. We got to start doing that with our votes. Whoever you're endorsing. And embrace conversation with people around you, because it's going to take a shift in mindset. Because again, like I said, we are in a cult. We think that there is only these two options. They're not. And we don't have to take what they give us.
I think that gets into like our next question. Our last question is, if both Republicans and Democrats have had a hand in the increase of incarceration of immigrants, then how can we either hold them accountable or move away from a two-party system effectively?
Exactly. So we have to start giving them demands. Like within the No Kings protest. Let's start making actual demands. We got 100,000 people out here, y'all. Let's make these demands and make them clear. Make sure everybody knows them. Make sure that everybody who is feeling the same feelings that we are not okay with this presidency, let's start putting the thoughts out there of what we want our government to do. Like one thing, easy layup, Medicare for all. If you're not pushing that, okay, you're not getting my vote. The abolishment of ICE. Okay, you're not getting my vote if you're not going for that. Or at least some type of fucking reform. If you sit here and you act like this shit's normal, I can't fuck with you. You're not going to get my vote. Stand on it. We got to stand on it. And start having these conversations with people around you, because it's going to take more than just you.
And if you don't stand on it when you get into office, then you're not coming back.
Exactly. Like it makes me so disappointed that like somebody like Frey is able to get back into office, because all the shit that he said he was going to do after George Floyd, after all this bullshit, he still sat here and continued to make policies that hurt us. Support policies that hurts us. And I'm super proud of, I can't think of his name right now, Omar Fateh, is that his name? Super proud of how much work he did. But that's what it takes, is that we're going to have to start pushing and taking chances with people like him, and pushing people like him to the forefront, saying, nah, people like you, Frey, you're spineless. We can't do it. Just because you have a D right by your name does not mean I'm gonna fucking support you.
But it also means that you guys need to check your biases as well. Because I think a big part of why there wasn't a win there is because people have way too many unchecked biases in there. That's
about
one part
our Somali community.
The other part is, of course, right, Minnesota is far from being perfect and has gerrymandering that happens here right, within the Twin Cities.
Yeah.
Which is part of the reason why, you know, if people actually were able to get out there and vote that were able to, there would be a different story.
And we just, again, we can't settle anymore, man. We can't settle anymore. The revolution starts within you first. So once you decide that you're not gonna settle anymore, let's start moving forward. Let's make this shit shake. Because that's what it takes. It takes fuck all the other bullshit, the semantic, the performative bullshit. What it takes is here. And then spreading that to your community. Picking up a damn book. Ask yourself some questions. Ask yourself why. Why do I think like that? Why did I say that? Why is the narrative that? Why is that the perspective that I'm only getting in here in this environment? Ask yourself those questions. And then start asking other people those questions. Once you finally figure out your answers, ask other people those questions. Build off of that. Help someone else expand. Because this is what's going to happen. This is what it takes for us to start holding these motherfuckers accountable. We got to hold each other accountable. We got to have conversations with each other. Like, that's really where it goes. Because the reality is the basic average Democrat supports genocide, supports the killing of black and brown people all over this country, the enslavement of black and brown people, which is all people, actually all people in this country. They also are complacent within the deaths that we bring to our service members in the military by sending them over to a war. Because we're not okay with Trump just going to send these people over to the war without us talking about it, but they still agreed on it when they voted. So that's it. We can't fuck with y'all. Everybody who just voted yes to that shit, you're gone. No, we're not. You made your decision.
The fact that you thought it was even a decision in the first place is crazy.
Right.
And, like, I understand, you know, people don't want the government shut down, blah, 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 all this. But if you're going to shut it down anyways, you might as well make it worthwhile, like you didn't do earlier in this year.
What is it worth? Millions of lives? Because that's what we know. That's what comes with this. On both sides. We're both going to lose. Shit, we are already losing. What is it going to take? Say no. No more. No more. No more of this shit. You're not going to send us to war. You're not going to send my brother to war. You're not going to send my son to war. You're not going to send my daughter to war. You're not going to send any of my family to war. You're not going to send my uncle. You're not going to send my cousin. You're not going to send anybody. That's not... Draw that line at least. God damn. Medicare for all. Draw that line. We're not going to criminalize houselessness. If you're sitting here trying to criminalize that shit, get the fuck out. You're the first on the list when we start eating the rich. That's it. Don't settle. At the end of the day, we just need to wake up. That's all it is. We're in a cult. The American cult. We're normalized to seeing people out on the street when we're the richest country in the world. We got billionaires who can wipe their ass with $100,000 and not think about it. We have to wake up and accept that, yes, we are the villains. We are the villains when it comes to foreign policy, when it comes to going into other countries. We are. Number 3, we got to accept that we enslave people. We still enslave people. And if you're okay with that, you're on the list too for when we eat the rich. Number 4, we got to get rid of these. We got to get rid of these. I strongly believe in this identity of like, yes, you're an Asian American, you're an African American, you're this, you're that. You're human. So when I see an Asian American or African American, Mexican American, white American, what the fuck ever, take the American out. When I see a human being being killed by the state, I'm not going to find any excuse for that. I'm not going to accept that. And if you can accept that, then you're on the list too. We got to start moving forward as a country. And if we want that, that's what it takes. Not accepting that bullshit. Because what is different? What the fuck is different from when the Nazis, when they were doing their bullshit, when they got their information from us? We call these Nazis monsters. What does that make us if they did it based off of us? And then we continue to do those same strategies today. And if you're complacent within that, you're complacent within being a Nazi. That's it. Point blank, period. Fucking no. You're complacent within being an American. And that's all we got. We thank you guys for tuning in today. I feel like I was a little bit out of there. A little bit all over the place today. But that's all good. We appreciate y'all tuning in. Mm-hmm. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, share. If you need any help with any resources, we got some below. Make sure you check that out. And, don't forget to open up your eyes, open your mind, and keep
your
on.
Ears.
And your ears, yes. And open up a book. Really appreciate y'all. Hope y'all have a wonderful rest of your week, whatever time. I don't know. I'm having a day. Y'all, thank you for tuning in. Have a great day. Have a peace of mind. I don't know what I say. Great health and wealth. Ashe.
Ashe.
I run it for people, baby.
To truly choose to love is heroic.
Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people. And we're going to have to put it back in the hands of the people.